distinguished guests, members of Estia, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the University of Kent and the Cypriot Estia of London, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the Hellenic Centre to participate in this evening's interesting talks and discussions. Firstly, let me introduce myself to those of you who don't know me, which is probably most of you. My name is Hellenic and I'm chair of the Cypriot Estia of London. I'm going to give a very brief introduction to our three distinguished academics, who are each going to be giving a very short speech this evening, and I'm just going to give you a very brief autobiography of each of our speakers, but you will actually see that on your seats you have a detailed autobiography of each of the speakers. So our first speaker this evening is Dr. Emel, Akcali, Senior Lecturer at the Department of Politics and International Relations at Swansea University. Prior to this, she held positions at the Universities of Marseille and Budapest. Her teaching and research interests span the state, society, conflict and politics in the Middle East and North Africa. She's a published author of a considerable number of books, the titles of which you have in front of you. Our second speaker this evening is Neophytos Loizides, who's Professor of International Conflict Analysis at the University of Kent. He has previously taught at Queen's University Belfast and Princeton University and held fellowships at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. He's the author of a number of published books, again, a list you all have in front of you. He's currently working on a new public opinion survey focusing on the Greek and Turkish Cypriots' views on the future of reunification and those of the global Cypriot diaspora. This is being funded by the United States Institute of Peace and the British Academy. One thing I failed to do, I wanted to especially welcome our special guest this evening, I think Mr. Theodoros Bopsis, from the Consul General of the High Commission of Cyprus, Mr. Takuya Tanimoto, First Secretary of the Embassy of Japan, and Mr. Konstantinos Thanopoulos, Consul of the Greek Embassy, Mr. Richard Lee Smith and Adam Leakey, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Sorry, I should have done that at the beginning. And our very final speaker is Mr. Yuji Uesugi. I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrongly. Who is Professor at the Faculty of International Research and Education at Waseda University in Tokyo. He's a peace activist, editing a number of books on peace building in Asia. He has established a peacekeeping NGO operating mainly in Timor-Leste and Cambodia, for which he served as General Secretary for 2 years, and as Deputy Executive Director from 2002 to the present day. He has held government positions both in the peacekeeping and policing of this area. He has been honoured for his work in educating and training military officers preparing for peace operations. Right, with no further ado now, I'm going to hand over to our chair for this evening, Mr. Kostas Gliantros, who is going to chair this evening's proceedings. And he is chair of the Hellenic Centre Trust, which is the parent body of the Hellenic Centre. Thank you, Kostas.
Thank you, Hellenic.
Welcome, everybody, on my behalf as well. This evening's, or whatever you like to call it, get-together of what talks about it is most timely and appropriate, since we've just had another effort at reaching some sort of agreement in Cyprus. It has been has adjourned, and they're trying to get back again. Once again, we've had more than 50 years of ideas of how to solve the Cyprus problem, none of which seem to have produced any real results. So I'm really hoping that we will hear both from our speakers tonight and from you some new ideas which you can pass back to the professionals and see if they can do a bit better than they've done so far. So without any more ado, I will just say that the format which we're taking, each speaker will speak for about 10 minutes. And I will not take questions to each speaker until the end. And then we'll take questions which we'll direct with the further speaker. But before, and I really would like to have a very clear distinction between questions which require answers and the general discussion which will follow later. And now is a particularly Cypriot, may I call it fault, of starting with giving a whole speech without asking a question, and I would really ask you to resist from doing that. Ask your question first, because the quicker we finish the questions, the earlier we'll get into the general discussion. Okay? Thank you very much. Our first speaker is Emel Akcali, who, as you heard, is a senior lecturer at the Department of Politics and International Relations at Swansea. Emel, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's my first time at the Hellenic Center. I'm very happy to be here. The main question was what went wrong in the peace negotiations, what went wrong in the last ones, and that was we tried to form our discussion today around that. And while thinking about it, I came up with 5 main headings of what could possibly go wrong in this. And the first heading that I came up with was the elections in TRNC. I mean, I tried to go from the more micro scale to the macro scale. So the first one was the change in the domestic politics of the Northern Cyprus politics, because it was at the beginning when the negotiations started. Again, there was a more pro-reunification government, and then after the elections that it turned out to be, the government became a more hardliner, or maybe more national, I mean what we can say, more nationalistic. So in this sense, obviously, this also had a repercussion on the, not only on the negotiations, but later how things actually have been formed, how the relationships or how the politics have been formed later. And the second one, it's very important as well, because that's, although for pro-reunification Turkish Cypriots, Turkey is considered as an external actor, we all know that it is a very internal actor of the Cyprus problem today. So that's the other thing, was the internal politics in Turkey, especially everybody knows what happened in the summer 2016, the coup d'etat, and after the developments in the domestic politics in Turkey, the polarization, and also the struggle, like the power struggle within the Turkish army, and we all know about in the purge in the Turkish army, but not only that, also all the opponents, the opposition. So this, I think, had a big effect on the Cyprus question as well, which I will go into detail in the questions and answers period. So the other thing, after, of course, this coup d'etat, the security doctrine, the pro-security people, the politicians, and also the army has come up with a more hardliner security, which is called the Blue Homeland kind of security event, and this has been proposed by an admiral, who has been a retired admiral who was in jail actually for a few years because of all this Ergenekon case, and now he has come up with this Blue Homeland doctrine that Turkey needs to protect its interest in the Eastern Mediterranean and elsewhere, because it is a country which is surrounded by 3 seas, but it has not done so much to protect its interest in the seas. So now Turkey is becoming actually it should become more aggressive. That's the whole thing, in the seas to protect its interests. And I think that this is also very important, which then has a big impact on the future of the Cyprus problem. And related to this, obviously, is the energy problems now in the hydrocarbons. Obviously, we cannot think about this Cyprus problem separate from this question at the moment, because it is the question in the Eastern Mediterranean, and it doesn't concern only the Turkish and Greek Cypriots or Turkey or Greece, but it has some other actors, and this needs to be taken into consideration, like Israel, Lebanon, Egypt, and this Eastern Mediterranean is quite a problematic area in terms of the exclusive economic zone and continental shelf, and of course to look for hydrocarbons in this region. And it has not only become a problem between Cyprus and Turkey, but obviously also between Cyprus and Israel and all that. And I think this is becoming quite a subject right now. And I don't know how it complicates, in my opinion, the whole question, the whole Cyprus problem at the moment. And we can actually think about that also, because this is kind of the larger geopolitical. So as I said, I'm going from the micro to the macro. And then from that, that's the regional problem. So we started with the domestic, the local problem, and then more Turkey, and then this regional problem. And now there's the whole thing that we need to consider, that's at the international level. So the most macro level is that the how things are in the world today. With the Trump government, with what's going on between Russia, the States, or again in Syria, or in China, and also what's going on in UK at the moment, or what's going on in Europe. The whole problem is that the Cyprus problem is not, and I'm sorry to say this, but it's not a thing of the world events, world politics at the moment, because there are so many other serious problems. So how are we going to actually, who are you going to attract in all these problems, to people, to Cyprus, in order to solve this problem? It doesn't seem, especially besides Syria at the moment, Cyprus is a frozen conflict. So besides kind of these problems, and it can be a much, with the refugee crisis and all that, then obviously I think it wasn't so surprising that there has not been a pressure on the parties in order to solve the problems recently. It's not like the momentum that we had when Cyprus Republic was becoming a European Union member has been lost, and then it's kind of hard to catch that momentum at the moment, I think, considering the world events or the geopolitical situation or the positioning of these world actors at the moment as well. So maybe then later that we can think about in these terms. So the domestic level, regional level, world level, and how can we situate Cyprus within all this? And obviously this creates all obstacles on the micropolitics of Cyprus today, which then hinder the peace negotiations. I just said these things in general, but I will go into detail when you ask me questions later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Emel. Thank you very much indeed. Our second speaker participant is Neophytos Loizides, who is Professor of International Conflict Analysis at the University of Kent. Neophytos?
Yeah, thank you very much,
Let me get this closer to you, so
I'll bring that.
Yeah, you've got the. That's it.
You can all hear me now. Thank you very much, Costa, and thank you very much, all of you, for attending this event tonight. A very critical juncture on the Cyprus talk. I would particularly like to welcome our Japanese guests, from the Foreign Commonwealth Office, and also thank Andreas Ekeshis for helping organizing this event. Our cooperation the last few weeks has been fantastic, coming up with the idea of this event, and also inviting everybody who would like to attend. When we're dealing with problems that are so complex, like the Cyprus one, it's always tempting to look at immediate causes of the stalemate. We have been having a stalemate for the last century, an unfortunate situation that we cannot agree on a solution. We've been very close to a settlement so many different times with positive, proactive involvement of the United Nations, of the European Union, yet we have failed. And it's always tempting to come up with a story that one side is responsible or the other side is responsible. We can list as Greek Cypriots a very long number of causes, blaming the other side. The Turkish Cypriot brothers can do exactly the same, but often these are the immediate reasons. And while it is not necessarily untrue to point to responsibility of leaders or their communities during these kind of stalemates, is not productive, because we're not thinking of the deeper reasons why we end up having those stalemates. I will speak tonight as mostly as a political scientist, what surprises me as someone who studies politics and international relations. And when we look at the Cyprus problem, there is an obvious imbalance of power. You have a Greek Cypriot community that is numerically bigger than the Turkish Cypriot community. So it's expected for the Turkish Cypriots to fear us because of the history. And then there is Cyprus, a very small country, and the Greek Cypriots being a minority in the region. And this is how Loizides framed the problem many, many years ago, decades ago, explaining to the international community how both communities express their fears. But since then, we haven't looked at models and examples from other countries who face very similar situations like us, and how they manage to address them. In a situation like that, where you have this double minority syndrome, where both Greek Cypriots feel threatened by a bigger country, and Emel put it very nicely. Yesterday it was a strategic death of Davutoglu. Today is a Mavi homeland of the retired admiral. Tomorrow is going to be another framing of a situation in the Turkish leadership. This inevitably causing a lot of fear among our people in Cyprus. Every time I call my father, who fought in 1974, and has experience of the war and the trauma of being subjected to a conflict, he always tells me, what is going to happen next? Are we threatened? Should we move to the gate? You should better move before October, end of October, when you can do it. So people fear, and people have this emotion. It is very natural to do so. So in situations like that, we need to think of what kind of precedents we had in international relations, what kind of models, how other societies have managed successfully to address similar models. We also have to think of the progress we have done in Cyprus so far. We often talk about the Cyprus stalemate as something that has not changed, something that has stayed the same from 1974. And Emel very nicely framed the situation of what is problematic so far, but there has been dozens of successful bi-communal programs the last decades. More than 40 million crossings between Greek and Turkish Cypriots in the island. Our surveys, and we've been working on a number of surveys in the two communities. Hellenic kindly mentioned that we're running now the first survey of the diaspora, parallel to the two communities in Cyprus running the same survey in the diaspora. I can talk more about that later on. So we have data, and we can follow what is happening in the public opinion, and it's complete opposite of what is happening at the geopolitical level. This is schizophrenia of the Cyprus problem. You have all these provocations, all these conflictual statements, conflictual relationship at the geopolitical level, but the number of people who support bi-communal federation, when we ask the question, this is growing. And this is shown not only in our own surveys, it's shown by surveys by SEED, by Interpeace, surveys by the World Bank that are also running every few months in a regular basis. So there is an element of optimism there, and people's power, people's public opinion is extremely important in that area. So the first is, let's think of the positive, let's think of the progress that has been done so far, how close we have been in the Guterres package, and also all the agreements we have made in the past. Let's build on those agreements, and let's see whether these shared visions of federalism that has a mandate by the people in elections and in public opinion polls can transform into something that can bring us together. I know that a lot of people are not 100% happy with the progress done so far, but this is a good starting line to proceed in the future. And when it comes to presidents, there's a lot to build on. I have added a small piece with different examples from different other conflict zones. I wouldn't go into detail with each of them, but some of them can be domestic solutions, looking at what kind of security arrangements we can have in Cyprus after a peace settlement. Other societies who have been more conflictual than Cyprus, including Lebanon and Bosnia, one of the positive news we hear in peacekeeping operations, they managed to bring together their armies and create a national army, and this national army works professionally with all ethnic groups in the society, with all communities, to address their problems. There can be that international dimensions as well. The recent progress that we have with the Kudelis package, it takes away Turkish guarantees. The only thing that needs to be resolved is the presence of the Turkish and Greek contingents and how long they could stay. So they're very close to do that. So can we come with ideas of supplementing those contingents with countries that can be credible and can be acceptable for both Greek and Turkish Cypriots? They can be countries within the European Union. They can be countries in the developing world. There are advantages and disadvantages of the two. They can be countries with a lot of experience in international peacekeeping, countries that have a complementary interest in European security, and countries who can help us in this very difficult transition we're going to be facing. And then there are questions about what kind of steps we can take to broaden our understanding of security. Security is not only having armies and being subjected to international peacekeeping forces supporting us. It's about human rights, it's about broadening human rights, about every citizen knowing that they can have a protection. If anything goes wrong, they can address their considerations, their grievances could be addressed. We're very privileged in the case of Cyprus to be part of the Council of Europe, to have access to the European Court of Human Rights. We're in a very privileged position to be part of the European Union, at the same time being part of major international organizations. So can we think of other immediate steps to address human rights and to provide our citizens a sense of security that will guarantee the implementation of a peace settlement in the future?
Thank you very much. Third speaker now is Yuji Uesugi, who is professor at the Faculty of International Research and Education at the Waseda University in Tokyo. The floor is yours. Let me bring the same microphone with you. There we go.
Thank you very much for having me here. I was a student of PhD program at University of Kent around 20 years ago, and I did my case study on Cyprus. So before Cyprus was part of EU, I did field research in Cyprus, and I visited both south side and north. I haven't returned to Cyprus since then, and last year, after 20 years, I visited. Something has changed, while others has not changed. I was so happy to see that there are some borders or crossing was open so that people can actually travel. When I was a student, because I was third party, I was able to travel to the north side from the south side. One of the former graduates of University of Kent was waiting the other side of the checkpoint, and he was escorted me to his house and beaches, many other places. So I have very good memory. And I also visited a village called Pila, where the bi-communal meeting was taking place. And I met a group of young people, musicians, they formed a joint bi-communal band. They were singing a song, I think in Impila, or maybe later in Paris. It was 20 some years ago, so I'm not sure which was the place. But they sing a song called "We Deserve Better." And if I'm not mistaken, the Greek Cypriot wrote the song, and then Turkish Cypriot put the music on it, and they sang together. And there are a number of bi-communal activities, and I got a list of bi-communal activities like 20 years ago, and so many things were happening. But at the same time, I was told by these peace activists, some people are very much interested in these bi-communal activities, but most of them are not interested in it. So those who are coming to the bi-communal activities were quite limited. That was the message I got from the activists. But at that time, people were talking about the EU joining the EU, and we thought that would be a good incentive for both parties to get together and resolve the issues. But as you know, that joining the EU did not bring two parties to actually sign the peace agreement. I was away from the Cyprus questions, and I returned to Japan. And because Japan is located in Asia, I was involved more in the problem in Asia. I was sent by my government to go to a place called Mindanao, the Philippines. The Philippines is basically a Christian, a Catholic country, but in one island called Mindanao, the second biggest island, is originally from the land of Muslims. But when the Americans colonized, Americans sent a lot of immigrants, Christian immigrants to the Mindanao island. So now the Muslims are the minority in their own homeland. So since the 60s, they have been struggling to become independent because they want us to live under the Sharia law. So it's kind of an old conflict, very similar to Cyprus. But what I found it different is that in Cyprus, the objective is to have a reunification, and the minority will be taking part in the decision-making of the state as a whole. On the other hand, the Bangsamoro, they call it Bangsamoro, is Bangsa is the homeland, and the Moro is the Muslims. So the Muslim country, they call it Bangsamoro. They won't just leave us alone. We want to have our own liberty, and then hopefully become independent, but if not possible, give us enough autonomy so that we can live our life in our way. So this could be a little bit different. But like in Cyprus, Greek Cypriots feel they are kind of minority in the region, while Turkish Cypriots feel they are minority in the island. The Bangsamoro case, the Christians are minority in the region because we have Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, a lot of Muslim populations. I mean, I think Philippines is the only Christian countries. So they feel that they are kind of a minority, and they feel the growing Muslim population is a threat to them. So in that sense, they are very much similar feeling of insecure. But they have reached a peace agreement, and they are trying to create an autonomous vision within one republic. But it was very interesting that when the president signed the agreement and giving the Muslim enough autonomy so that they feel that they are good enough, not the perfect independence, but they have good enough autonomy. The problem of the democracy is that the Supreme Court overruled. Actually, they told the president that what you have decided and signed is against your constitution. The Philippines is supposed to be a united republic, and we were not supposed to give an autonomy to a particular area. Then they have renegotiated, and they come up with another peace agreement, and hopefully this will stick, but we haven't had the complete finish of this peace agreement. They are still in the way. There will be a referendum in the coming years. And then I was asked to talk about on Cyprus and also how Japan needs to or should be involved in this. We have been a major player in dealing with the Cyprus issues. I am not sure whether we have a good reason to get involved. I am not even sure whether we will be able to contribute positively, but let's think. Let me think how we will be able to get involved. Japan is an ally of the United States, and we see United Kingdom as a global ally against Chinese expansions, particularly in the Indo-Pacific oceans. Well, we believe in the liberal values, so we see Europe as our liberal partners. So we would like to continue to maintain this international global liberal order because we are the beneficiaries. We see nowadays that Turkey and the United States are not getting along well, and that could be a not good sign for us. So one reason that maybe if we can offer something that we would like to maintain a good relationship, we would like to maintain a good relationship between the Turkey and Europe and Turkey and the United States. Second reason is the Middle East is quite fragile, and we see a number of difficult situations going on. And as a responsible stakeholder in the international community, Japan needs to be there. But unfortunately, we have not been taking part in these important situations. And I think that Cyprus is very strategically located. So there will be a kind of a national interest, I believe, from the Japanese point of view, to get involved in the Cyprus issue. Is there any benefit for Cypriot or Greek or Turkish to have the Japanese involvement? I am not sure. But we have very good relationship with all the parties. And probably we have seen as non-threatening members. So hopefully with this neutral stance, we may be of use. Maybe you are aware, after President Trump has assumed his office, the United Nations peacekeeping has been under a great pressure. If you are not able to bring a positive result, let's finish this. So a number of UN operations are now facing a huge budget cut, and some of them have to be terminated. I know that in the UNFIP, about 1/3 of the budget is coming from the Republic of Cyprus and also Greece. But at the same time, I think they face a lot of pressures to terminate that kind of operations. Maybe Japan can play in that role, maintaining the UN presence there, or alternatively, if the UN has decided to withdraw, perhaps right now you have UK and Slovenia and some Latin American groups in the major body of the initiative. Maybe you can if you transform that kind of body into NATO, then you can have Turkey, Greece, and UK, and Slovenia is still there. So by transforming, you may provide a framework for all these major players to stay. How Japan can actually involve in this? Probably not much, but in 2015, in Japan, we changed our regulation. Before that, basically, when we send our troops outside of Japan, it has to be under the UN command and control. So we changed our regulation, and now we were able to dispatch our troops, which is under the command of maybe NATO or EU or other international entities. So that could be another segue for Japan to get involved. And finally, since we have foreign officers here from the UK, I don't want to be deported. but in Japan, we have a US-Japan Security Alliance, and under that treaty, we host US bases there. And then US uses our bases to attack Afghanistan or Iraq. Some of the Japanese citizens don't like it, but because of the government treaty, we keep US bases there. And as far as I understand, the sovereign base areas are the territory of UK. One, I think, possible arrangement is the Cyprus-UK Security Treaty, which allows the UK to use the base while the sovereignty will be returned to Cyprus. I don't know whether Cypriots are asking for this, but with this kind of arrangement, could be other contemporary security framework which could be available, which what I was asked to mention. To conclude, as maybe innocent or third party, and Japan is interested in. I'm not, by the way, I'm not representing our government. Just an ordinary university professor thinks that Japan has a stake in involving in the Cyprus issue because of its link with Europe, because of its link with the UK, and because of its link with Turkey and Greece. I believe that we need to get involved, and then we have a legal foundation for us to get involved, and it's up to probably people in Cyprus and also guaranteeing country whether you need us, or if you need us, what kind of support are you expecting from us? If you don't need us, it's okay. But my mission is to explore a possibility, because I want to see my country is involving in a peace process. Because I did my PhD on this particular topic, and then I would like to be proud of my own country contributing to the world peace, not just sitting in the Far East and doing our own thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, there are some interesting thoughts, especially from Yuri in the end, another player in the Cyprus problem.
You don't need
really.
anymore.
Well, that's,
Why
look,
not?
we're here to explore new ideas.
It's a
You never know.
catalyst.
That's,
It's a catalyst, not a
absolutely,
player.
absolutely. And that's what we're here to do. Right. As I said, questions to our speakers first, please. Yes.
Good speeches. It'd be nice to hear that Japan may take an interest. But my question is, especially Emel, who is closer to the problem than Japan, I would say. Would Akcali or the Turkish Cypriots ever be allowed by the Erdogans of this world to agree to anything? That's a question.
Would Turkish Cypriots ever be allowed by Turkey to make their own decision?
Have they got the freedom, basically,
Yeah.
to come to a solution if Turkey doesn't agree to it?
Shall we answer right away?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I'm going to do some self-promotion here because I recently published an article about it. It's the self-determination claims of Turkish Cypriots vis-à-vis Turkey. And Turkish Cypriots use Facebook really very, abundantly. I mean, that's their area, the area that they use most at the moment, also for their political claims. I have been following them since 2009, and I look at these self-determined because there were a lot of Facebook groups that were formed. All these self-determination claims of Turkish Cypriots vis-à-vis Turkey. It was very interesting throughout the time how these claims have changed. At times, they were really very quite aggressive. Like they were saying that even some Turkish Cypriots were calling their fellow brothers to take up to arms against Turkey. There were these type of things. But then, they didn't have a lot of followers. But the Turkish Cypriots are becoming extinct. Turkish Cypriots, there was a lot of self-determination claims. But I think in time, these have become more moderate. But still, there's a huge, there's a huge still claim within the Turkish Cypriot society to keep this distinct Turkish Cypriot culture. So there is this kind of community protection, identity protection, or whatever claim within the Turkish Cypriot community. Politically, what can they achieve? The thing is, yes, it seems like, because it's a small community, it seems like they cannot do much vis-à-vis Turkey. But you need to understand, I mean, even in the Turkish society, people cannot do much at the moment. so it's a quite hard thing for the Turkish citizens. But this doesn't mean that they are mere kind of puppets of the Turkish government, because they are politically very vocal. They are politically very vocal. The opposition is quite vocal within the Turkish Cypriot community. And this actually kind of bothers a lot Turkish politicians, hardliner politicians, and this bothers a lot the Turkish Cypriot hardliner politicians as well. They are quite, within the Turkish community, the opposition, or the people who are pro-unification, or before who voted for Annan or whatever, they were so vocal in their criticism. So I think you need to give credit. I think something that I would ask the Greek Cypriots to do is to give credit to the Turkish Cypriots in their willingness, for their claim self-determination, or to decide for their own future. They're not mere puppets. And obviously they do whatever they can, because they also, I think it was thanks to a lot of very courageous Turkish Cypriots that they actually took this to the international platform in order to, and that's, I think in the 90s were the first time that actually the world could understand that there is a distinction, there is a difference between what the Turkish Cypriots think and what the Turks or the Turkish government think. Before they were seen like kind of united or something, but we all know that this is not the case, and they use whatever means that they can. Now social media is one means, for example, to actually voice these self-determination claims. At the end, what can you do about it? Obviously, as I said, there are so many parameters. Turkish Cypriots as a small community needs to play within all these parameters, as I explained, the domestic level, regional level, national level, and what can they really do? It's, as we all are, what can we do actually, even, in a country like here, as individuals, communities.
Yeah. If I can add to that, Erdogan's influence in the Turkish Cypriot community is not as large as it usually appears. So, for instance, if we look at the polls, increasing number of Turkish Cypriots in favor of reunification because they fear Islamization. This is obvious when we break the data with gender, while Greek Cypriot women tend to be more cautious of reunification. Turkish Cypriot women tend to be more moderate in favor of reunification because they fear that their rights will be violated in the future as part of increasing influence of Turkey. We also find in surveys that Turkish settlers are not significantly different in their public opinions than Turkish Cypriots. So instead of being attached to Turkey, they becoming more integrated in the Turkish Cypriot community. Remember, Erdogan lost the referendum in Cyprus, even only with Turkish citizens in the island, which included students. The other issue is that we find, for instance, that children of mixed marriage, marriage of father or mother from Turkey and Turkish Cypriot, tend to be the most moderate in all groups, and it's about 30% of the population. So the control there is not something that it can be exercised so firmly by Turkey. The realities on the ground are very different from the political imagination in Ankara. Plus, we don't know how long Erdogan will be in power. We have to have a strategy of outliving Erdogan, which is a long-term strategy, but also in the short term, the interest of Erdogan is different from the national interest of Turkey. Now, our analysis of Turkey is not anymore the analysis we used to do in the 1990s, where we used to analyze how the military thinks, or how the political parties think, or how the foreign ministry of Turkey thinks. Now it's about the political survival of a single regime with very narrow interests. So if in the future it's politically convenient for Erdogan to solve Cyprus' problem, because he sees this as part of his long-term survival politically, then we have to be in a position, everything else being equal, to grab the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Mr. Jubles.
There was a
First question for the first speaker. How would you describe the signs for a new revival of democracy in Turkey? And one question to Mr. Loizides. You see signs for a solution in this new situation now in Cyprus?
Yeah, when you mean the signs, the elections? Yeah, you mean the recent local elections, the signs? When you mean the signs, are you talking about the results of the local elections in Turkey? Are you? Is it okay? So yeah, I think that's kind of the opposition is growing against this Erdogan in Turkey. And this has been expressed a lot also within the youth. So there are a lot of there is a kind of a rising opposition that's coming out, and then people are being more vocal about it, despite the fact that it's kind of dangerous as well to be so vocal in social media or whatever. But people are taking their chances; they're becoming very courageous. How can I say? I mean, is this going to bring a huge change? It's very difficult to say such things at the moment. It's very difficult to say that, but because in 2013, when there were these Gezi protests, you thought that's kind of the real momentum, that things are going to change. But then, on the contrary, that Turkey has become even more authoritarian. And now, can it really take the chance to become authoritarian again? It's just, sometimes you see this light, things are changing, but then Erdogan government, I think, is striking back really hard. So at the moment, I also don't know, to be honest. That's why we keep working outside of Turkey as academics, because it's kind of hard, it's kind of harder to work, and even on not only in Turkey, but on Turkey as well at the moment. So I cannot really answer your question with very definite kind of opinions.
Thank you. No.
They usually say that political scientists are as good at predicting the future as economists. So one of the most useful analysis I read about Turkey is that Erdogan needs to decide whether he's a democrat or a dictator. So it's a question in the next few years, because he's losing public support, of whether he will become much more oppressive in trying to control the forces in his country, or gradually accept the fact that there are going to be challenges in his power and try to accommodate those and try to find a modus vivendi that will allow him and the opposition to have some kind of gradual transition to a different regime. We cannot predict that. But democratization, and both authoritarianism and democratization, pose challenges for us. We have situations in the past where countries were democratizing and they got involved in major crises. We had situations in the past that you had authoritarian regimes who signed peace agreements. So we have to be ready in all scenarios to adjust our policies accordingly. So one question here is what kind of strategy one adopts when you're facing multiple alternative scenarios, and how do you adjust your strategy? The other one is realizing your potential in negotiations. As Greek Cypriots, and Cypriots in general, we've never been in a better negotiating position. If you ask my humble opinion, even though we have the stalemate for such a long time, we are in a good position right now, partly because of Brexit. That gives us some more leverage in the negotiation. In a very positive sense, we can transform our relations with the United Kingdom and make it much deeper. And this is, I think, our challenge, if you wish, as Cyprus diaspora. How do we come up with ideas in the future as the community in the middle to make this relationship more long-lasting, stable, sustainable, equitable? The United Kingdom is changing. We might have in the future the most pro-European nation in Europe. The United Kingdom right now has the strongest pro-European movement. People are in the streets all the time. We have been surprises of what comes out in the United Kingdom in the next 2 years. Even the United Kingdom leaves and we have Brexit. United Kingdom, Britain might become the most committed country in terms of regional peacekeeping, partly because of the way things are changing in the political sphere. And then we have Greece, who has just survived a major financial crisis and is becoming again a very reliable partner in the European scene after a very long crisis, solve a major problem in the Balkans last year that nobody will imagine before. You have Mr. Skinas appointed Vice President of the European Commission. So a lot of things are happening at the international level that can give us optimism. So it's a question of what are you looking at? Are you looking at the blue homelands, or are you looking at some other signs? The situation right now is very unpredictable.
I just wanted to add something about this authoritarianism. It is true that Neo has been looking at the positive sides, and I just am looking at more negative. But there is tendency. There is authoritarianism is not only in certain parts of the world. There is also within the European Union even. The rise of authoritarianism. Before coming to UK, I was working in Hungary at Central European University. We had to move to Vienna right now, actually. We had to live, and this is why I also came to UK to work. So it's an EU country, and you see that exactly, it's another example of a country that was democratizing after it has become an EU member and after in the post-communist era, and it has become a very authoritarian country. And you know, the closure of a university, I cannot think of it. I mean that in Turkey right now, but it happened, and this is a very world famous, and where you had your MA as well, right? And it was a world famous university that could not anymore operate in an EU member country. So there are also these kind of, you know, it's not only certain areas. There is a rise of authoritarianism, even in in Europe and elsewhere as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting such a healthy discussion. Can I ask about the future and perspectives of the future from both the Greek Cypriot perspective and the Turkish Cypriot perspective. We talked just a moment ago about sort of your perspective of what the future might hold for Turkey, for the UK and for Greece, but what do the Greek Cypriots think the future holds on this issue, and what do the Turkish Cypriots think the future holds, and do you agree with them? Thank you.
Who wants to go first?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, it's hard to have a single view of how people see the future in both communities. We can look at political debates, public opinion polls. I think there is currently a democratic mandate that comes out of political elections, polls, public discussions that emphasizes the need for a federal solution in Cyprus. So, to give you an example, we're talking openly here. It's a friendly discussion. Few months ago, President Anastasiadis hinted. He didn't say it very clearly that there could be a different arrangement to bizonal, bicommunal federation. We saw immediately in the polls that the public became increasingly more supportive of federation. So once he thought that they're losing that, and that we might have some kind of other settlement, maybe a two-state solution, maybe something like Mindanao with autonomy, immediately the public said, no, this is not a good idea. And we're very surprised in the polls to see that people were more concerned with that, and that we have more support for federation. I don't think there is a mandate for any other type of a settlement. I think one of the unique and positive characteristics of the Cyprus settlement is that we agree very early in the process, since the late 1970s. In fact, in 1975, Cleridis made a speech in favor of having a federation as the overarching idea, and then immediately after we have a group of intellectuals who endorse the idea, all the political parties. So there is a joint understanding on both communities that this island would unite through a federation, and there are a lot of detail behind this about political equality, about arranging mutual security for both communities. There's a lot of infrastructure there. And this idea of federation has helped the Cypriots immensely. In the absence of that, after 50 years, nobody would have talked about a reunified Cyprus. We have similar situations, let's say in Ukraine, or in Kosovo, in Serbia and Kosovo, where you didn't have this joint understanding of a federal eventuality, that one day the country will reunify. Very, very, very quickly, within a decade in the case of Serbia and Kosovo, people realized that there will be a two-state solution. In the case of Ukraine, nobody talking about Crimea returning back to Ukraine. People have forgotten, even though Ukrainians had a very, very strong support by the West. The Cypriots at the time had no support in 1974 because of the reputation of the Greek junta before the invasion. So it was a federal dynamic that brought the Cypriots together. It brought the Security Council together, the major countries, political parties. Political parties won elections in a federal platform. So I think the short question the short answer to your question is federalism. The idea that Cyprus can reunify, the idea that it could become a functional federation.
Just, I want to also talk about another dimension of how people see the future. Mind you, that obviously people have an opinion about the future of Cyprus. At the moment, I think people are more concerned when they think about future. Cyprus problem is not the first thing that comes to. I think you would not disagree with me, but a lot of people are also thinking about the socio-economic. What will be the socio-economic benefits of this? I think this is a very important part. Even it played a major role in the Annan plan time. Even the pro-reunification. People in Cyprus, in order to convince people to vote yes in favor of Annan plan, they were really doing all these like ads. If you vote for Annan plan, you're going to get these beautiful houses. If you vote for Annan plan, so they were playing a lot with the socio-economic benefits of what people are going to get. So I think this also is a very important part of when they think, of the future. And to be very honest, now if you look at the, of course, more politicized people, or including activist politicians, this can be their daily concern. But I think for the majority of Turkish Cypriots, I can speak about it, what the talks, the following as well, as I said, they are very vocal in the social media. It's all the socio-economic feature is also a very major concern, and I think this needs to be, this is the major concern actually, of what this feature will bring to them in those terms.
If I can make a small comment on this. If one looks at the polls, there are different groups of people who are becoming increasingly more in favor of a settlement. One group in the Greek Cypriot community is refugees. We didn't see any difference in the Annan plan between refugees and non-refugees from the polls we have at that time, or by looking at the electoral voting in some of the centres that have a high percentage of refugees. Right now, the number of people who will absolutely oppose a settlement is almost double in the non-IDPs compared to IDPs. So the refugees as a group are moving towards a settlement because they are realizing that this is their last chance, and that if there is no settlement, they will be the ones losing their houses. It's very obvious in the polls. It's very obvious if you look at any Facebook group that involves IDPs and refugees. The other group that is becoming more pro-reconciliation is people who have more contact. I mentioned before we had 40 million crossings in Cyprus for a small island of 500,000. There are people who daily visit the other side. And the more contact we have, the more people overcome their prejudices, and the more supportive towards a settlement they become. So there is an interaction that is gradually leading a lot of people in favor of the settlement. Also in the Turkish Cypriot community, for the first time, we see in the polls that there are some Turkish Cypriots who also want to return in their properties in the south. So we're talking about a much more integrated Cyprus, if there's going to be a settlement. So in the past we couldn't see these as large percentages. Now we can see up to 10% of Turkish Cypriot refugees wanting to come to the south. There's numbers of abandoned villages in Paphos. Nobody lives there. Communities that used to thrive almost 50 years ago. So we can think of reunified Cyprus in also demographic terms. And the number of Greek Cypriots who want to return also is quite high. It's about 50% under Greek Cypriot administration, about 20-25% under Turkish Cypriot administration. This is not insignificant. Numbers are quite important. This is also driving the whole process. Plus, as I mentioned before, in the north, the demographic group that is mostly pro-settlement are women who fear the threat of their daily life because of the events and developments in the region that you mentioned before. So that's a demographic profile in a nutshell of the Cyprus problem.
Thank you. At the back there, yes.
Hello everyone, I'm very thankful to all the speakers for their wonderful speeches, especially to you, Professor Uesugi, for your very transparent and very truthful thoughts about the situation in Cyprus, especially with Japan. Now, my name is Diana Konstantinidi. I am an international human rights lawyer at 33 Bedford Road Chambers. My question is, if the Republic of Cyprus would conceptualize a more prominent legal venue in pursuing its international legal rights, either at the ICJ or ICC or any other tribunal, will that affect the discussions about potential peace discussion, or indeed as to what you've been referring to, Ms. Loizides, the strategy, the policy strategy that the Republic of Cyprus is currently undertaking? My concern is that the Republic of Cyprus has failed to undergo the international legal venues that it is allowed to go through, and as such, Turkey itself, and as you did say, it does pursue in every possible way its rights, and I will put that in brackets, its rights. So this is my question. Thank you.
In theory or in general, by looking at other cases, if you, I think going to the legal procedure could be the last resort. Or probably do. You need the consensus from both sides to bring this issue to the case.
Yeah.
So that's...
or you need a security General Assembly resolution, but that would be only consultation, so it will not be binding. So both sides have to agree to take it for arbitration, or it could go through the General Assembly, but that would not be binding. Sorry for the interruption.
So you're asking that the 1974 Turkish invasion is the...
Yes, not just that itself, but major breaches that have been ongoing. So it's the continuity of those breaches, and whether if the Republic of Cyprus is going to pursue any of those legal values, whether it will affect the peace discussions that are happening. And I'm happy to discuss with the Republic of Cyprus to explore these values, because I think that they should be utilised. They are there and they have the right to do so. And I don't understand why they failed to do that until today.
Perhaps we can take that in the discussion part. Yes.
Yeah, it's a very good question.
Thank you.
I never thought of that.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, can I intervene on this, because this is an extremely interesting question. I think the best answer will be given by Achilleas when he comes here in November 5th, because he was the one who actually won the trials and he started the whole thing. Achilleas is extraordinary in this, to the extent that he was born in Turkey, because he goes around and throws a lawsuit that you don't expect it to happen. He does it in a very, very effective way. My understanding, to your question, talking to the Greek Cypriot lawyers, is that their position is already so strong in terms of the legality that they don't need to go further. So if the marginal benefit that you have by winning an additional case is so small, and at the same time, if by accident you lose one of these trials, you might create a very negative precedent, because your strongest point is the legality, and if you push a little bit more, you don't gain anything in addition, because essentially you won the case when it comes to the legality. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the UN recognizes that you have the legal right, and this cause of practical issues that we're trying to meet the concerns of the Turkish Cypriots in the middle. That's the framing that is given in the reports by the UN. But there's no doubt about the legality. Right? So that's, I think, the perception among Greek Cypriots, and that's what Achilleas was warning for many years. Don't take cases to the European Court of Human Rights, because we won there, and if you're taking more, we're eventually going to have to lose cases, as it happens with Dimopoulos and other situations. That's, I think, is an understanding within the Greek Cypriot legal circles, but I might be wrong. I don't know much about that. But where I see your point is what happens after the settlement. So in a number of peace settlements, and I mentioned that in my short memo, South Tyrol, the new agreement, the Prespas Accords, what you're trying to do is the following. Can you build within those agreements that we know they have benefits for the other side, they have benefits for us, a legal structure, and you lock the legal structure in the existing agreement. So in the case of Prespa, in the case of South Tyrol, what the drafters of the agreement have done is that it requires the a priori agreement of all parties that if anything goes wrong, there can be an arbitration by the ICJ. So imagine a situation that we have a dispute in the future on something with Turkey as a Republic of Cyprus, as United Republic of Cyprus. It wouldn't be up to Turkey to be convinced to come to the ICJ. If we follow the framework of South Tyrol or the framework of the Prespa agreement between Greece and North Macedonia, that would be obligatory and it's part of the agreement. They have to come to the court. So what you're suggesting can happen in the context of a future agreement, and that would be one of the implementation mechanisms, that the sides will need to resolve any outstanding issues in the ICJ. It happened in a number of occasions. It happens now with Belize and Guatemala. It's a surprise case. They have this long territorial dispute. It's not just about a rock or something, it's half of the country. And they decided that they will resolve it in the ICJ. And actually people voted in referendums to have this performed. So it can be a very effective mechanism. But my understanding from the Cypriot legal circles is that their case is so strong already that they don't need to push further.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thanks very much, first of all, for the very high quality and excellent speeches by all speakers. I think this is a very lively discussion, and I think it definitely contributes things. A brief comment to the gentleman from the Japanese side of the panel, if I may. I don't think there is any need to worry. We definitely need you. When it comes to UNVISIP, I think both resources in all forms are always needed. So I'm quite sure that if the Japanese government is interested in that, the means and the ways will be found. Two questions to both of you. It doesn't matter who answers what. First question regarding if we want to get back a little bit to the title of the presentation, which is about security frameworks and the current peace talks. Now, if we want to address that, it's very handy for me in a way because my colleague from the Turkish embassy is not present here. So I don't want to, I would like to hear his opinion as well, but so far the talks in the current state seem to have slowed down a bit, basically owing to the fact that the Turkish side is not so hot as to the prospect of a bizonal bicommunal federation. Do you think, do you see any possibility for Turkey moving anytime soon in order to recommit to a bizonal bicommunal federation in the new talks? And what would be, let's say, the price that Turkey would exact from that? I did note your presentation saying that, for example, the latest natural gas developments in the Eastern Mediterranean are not necessarily helpful. So that would be the first question. Second question, let's say the talks get started again and we are moving in a direction of a solution. Would the Greek side decide what would be, let's say, the feelings and the attitude towards the guarantee regime that would again come into play? Would they insist, what are the public attitudes? Would they insist on the complete abolition of the guarantees? Would they accept a temporary form of guarantee like a sunset clause, or would they, basically settle with the current format? I mean, what would be the public's attitudes in that respect? And I thank you very much again for all your contributions.
Yeah, I can go with that.
Okay, So Neo, when he was talking about his father, about fear and all that, so I teach a lot about emotions and international relations, because these are very important, how the discourses, the political discourses, what they create within the people, and this is a part of the international relations that we neglect actually, we kind of overlook. These are very important. So one is fear, the other is empathy. How the politicians can create empathy within the societies and how they create fear, then these actually turn into policy implications later. So I'm not sure, for example, at the moment, how the Turkish government is a kind of a very flamboyant and cowboy-like, okay, the federation is over, they don't listen to us, we are going to be more strict now in our cities, and we are going to be present, even more, kind of aggressive. But these are, yes, they have the right to create fear within individual people and within within people. So maybe it's for that objective. And then when you hear the admirals or who is behind this blue homeland doctrine, or again maybe Çavuşoğlu, who again, when he speaks, I was just looking at his most recent actually discourses, that the press releases, and he says the solution of federation is over for Cyprus, for example. Okay, they say such things, but how much are these discourses reliable? Because Turkey is also, even though it can be considered as a militarily strong actor, regional actor at the moment there, it's also restrained by a lot of things, right? I mean, it's also restrained in its capabilities, it's also restrained in its resources. Right now, for example, it has problems with the United States, which was a major ally. So now its soldiers and all that are being trained in Russia. It depends on Russia for energy and for military resources, but then it's also a rival in Russia in Syria. So Turkey is constrained also by a lot of factors in the region. So I don't know how serious we can take these political discourses, but they are right because they are efficient in creating fear. This is kind of the individual people. And then when individual people are fearful, obviously they act according to that. But actually, how much can Turkey say, how it can be constrained legally, as it has been mentioned, it can be constrained by other factors. So at the end, I don't think that Turkey has a lot of options. Then it cannot get the Northern Cyprus to get recognized internationally. It knows that. So I think at the end, it is, even though the discourses may change, again in Cyprus, I really don't think that Turkey has a lot of options at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes, Andrea.
Thank you very much, all of you, for really a very, very good discussion with very, very good presentations. My question is, it has been now nearly 70 years that we have got the Cyprus problem on our minds, all of us Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. Do you think that there has been failure by the United Nations in pushing strong for a solution to the Cyprus problem? And as Professor Yuesugi mentioned before, we came very, very close to having a solution at many times in those 70 years. I remember, for instance, 1965, when Garo Plaza's report, which came very, very close to being agreed by almost everybody except Turkey, I have to say. But in the process, eventually, we lost control of the problem, and the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots have become almost onlookers on a problem that they didn't have anything to do with, and they didn't have the power to solve it because of the involvement of other powers outside the area. So what do we look forward to? Can we take back control of our problem, and can we solve it, and how?
Please. Go ahead.
Okay, just briefly, and I think maybe the whole people of the, how the workers of the world unite. I think all the people of conflict-ridden countries need to reunite, because this is not a problem of the Cypriots only. Now I work on Syrian refugees on Turkey at the moment. This is my current research. There are 5 million people in Turkey, 5 million Syrians, 5 million refugees. I mean, they're not all refugees, they're called, but they're also, this is the thing, this is kind of the helplessness of people to take control of what's going on in their country. Kind of, they have like no say. People, in their country, so many foreign actors, soldiers are fighting right now. And nobody knows for what, nobody understands. And there was a big, for example, in Turkey, people were complaining, these Syrian men, they are here, they don't fight, and our soldiers are fighting in Syria. But they don't understand. If you ask the Syrian young man in Turkey, they say, we don't know what we are fighting for. Why would we fight what we fight? In Syria at the moment. And this is one thing. So it's just the people who find themselves in conflict. It's very hard for them to take control. The same thing for Bosnians, for example, right? The same thing for other people. Bosnia still, so many years have passed, they are still not in control of their country, I think. There is still a kind of, it works like a mandate, kind of. So I'm just thinking this is a general problem, not of Cypriots, but I think it needs to be discussed. Individual people, do they really have a control over the conflicts that happen in their country? And also, do they really have a control, a say in the future of their country? So this is, I think, kind of a more philosophical question than a practical one. That needs to be discussed further, actually. Do we have control?
I think there are limitations in our control, but we often have the strategies to turn disadvantages and constraints into opportunities and into resources. So take, for instance, the natural gas. It can be a curse, it can be also an opportunity. It's a question of what kind of decisions we make about it. And often we can come up with very simple solutions to address these problems. A few months ago we had an event with a Canadian minister in Cyprus. We actually first had a few meetings with him. He was very impressed by some of the legal frameworks we put as a Republic of Cyprus, because they control the use of resources. And any kind of spending from whatever we gain from natural gas is being transferred to the future generations, so subject to a future settlement. But what he advised us is that in the future, you can have a federal law that allows the company who comes to Cyprus and offers you the best offer to gain access to the resources. So in this way, if a Turkish company wins a competition and they have the best proposal to us, they can manage the resources in one particular area. If it's a Greek company, it can be a Greek company. If it's a Japanese company, so whoever offers the best option in an open competition. So looking at the right strategies, coming up with very simple, often ideas can help us. It's also an understanding that when communities are united, when they produce the right public images, international images. Look at, for instance, the case of Hong Kong right now. China, a very powerful country, there is an opposition in Hong Kong. The way that is portrayed in international media does not allow China to have full control and use its military power against the protesters. There are numerous cases where citizens have managed to block the very negative influence of domestic or foreign governments, starting from the revolutions in Eastern Europe, the movements in Latin America, civil disobedience in the United States of America, a lot of cases, and often what the strategies of those, because there's a whole literature about this, is that you need to be organized. It's like fighting a war. You have to be very organized, and you have to give the right messages, and you have to listen to what the oppressive government does. For instance, I was reading about how the Serbian revolutions were happening against Milosevic, and they had these amazing strategies of organizing the youth against Milosevic, and usually at the beginning of every protest they were putting the children of the policemen. So they knew that the police would not target them. So there's whole science of how citizens can protest and they can take control of situation. And I think Cyprus is moving to that direction, and increasingly by communal activity, Greek and Turkish Cypriots organizing themselves together. And this is happening in an occupied, half-occupied society with 40,000 Turkish troops. So it's very interesting. It's sort of a silent revolution that's happening from below, and I think through that we're gradually gaining control of the island, despite all the negative signs around us.
Thank you. I'll take one more question, if there is, down there, and then we must move on to discussion. Yes?
I have a question with all the speakers. In regards to the micropolitics, do you agree that Cypriot history education is the problem or a problem? And if so, if that is the problem, how do you resolve it?
The Cypriot history. Which side?
Both sides.
Yeah, I think there is a problem with the books. There have been attempts to change the books, and I think that's very important. I think beyond history books, it's very important to change the attitudes of public education teachers. So there is a lot of celebrations, commemorations that are taking place that are often quite poisonous, if I can use that phrase. And it's not part of them. There's a problem with the official curriculum. There's a problem with the way religious authorities, and there is also a problem with unofficial discourses in the interaction between teachers and the students. This is particularly a problem in the Greek Cypriot side, and we see it in the polls that the Greek Cypriot, I was very optimistic so far. One of the very negative signs we see in the polls is Greek Cypriot youth not being supportive at the same levels with the rest of the population. And I think this is an outcome of the education. We need to rethink all this, because we cannot have, as Greek Cypriots, an orientation towards federalism, and in our schools teach our children the complete opposite. I think that's counterproductive in terms of what we're trying to aim. It requires some action on our behalf.
Thank you. I must say I found the discussion tonight very refreshing. Thank you very much, first of all, to our three speakers and their thoughts and ideas, but also thank to you as well. I think this has given us the opportunity to really go back and reflect on what we have heard and develop further ideas. And I hope that Estia will organize another meeting of this nature, say in a few months' time, say when we see how far the Secretary General and his representative managed to come over the Assembly, the General Assembly that is coming now, and the new thoughts and ideas which are being discussed at the moment. Indeed, yes. Yes. We'll come to them in a moment. But it really is very, very interesting what is happening at the moment in Cyprus under the war, if you like. For example, we have seen suddenly a flood of Turkish ministers coming to the north of Cyprus and basically sidestepping the so-called president and actually choosing other people to oppose him. It's good to be talking about what we can do from underneath, but we must really remember the greater pressure from the big players in the area. You mentioned hydrocarbons and all the rest of it. Turkey has published a map, the blue homeland. This is which shows the Aegean, for example, split down the middle, exactly down the middle.
They got at least half, we get nothing.
Yeah. So, you know,
get a narrow corridor.
We must, whilst we have our own thoughts and ideas of working from the bottom, and believe me, I am actually, I've just come back from Cyprus, having been working across the north and the south on a number of projects which I won't go into now. So I'm very aware of the situation and the pressure of the actual people to get closer to each other. There are the bigger players in the field which we must not forget. And let's think more about that. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see what comes.